A single cargo ship landed in the dry valley, kicking up dirt and ash as it touched the rocky ground. Its engines hissed, then went silent. The back ramp lowered, and crates were pushed out, one by one. Some held old machines, others food, but one crate was different. It had metal bars, like a cage, and inside, something moved slowly. A young alien girl lay curled up on the floor of the cage. Her skin was pale purple, her body thin and weak. Her legs didn't move. Her arms trembled every time the crate shook. She was silent, her eyes wide and empty. She looked like a ghost, not a living being. At the edge of the auction zone, a human stood watching. His name was Jareth, once a soldier, now a survival instructor. He had sharp eyes, rough hands, and a quiet heart. He had seen many slaves come through this station, most of them angry, loud, or afraid. But this girl, she was something else. "What's wrong with this one?" Jareth asked the dealer. "She's broken." The dealer laughed. "Legs don't work, won't speak. Useless for labor. I'll throw her out tomorrow if no one takes her." Jareth looked. Again, the girl didn't react to the dealer's words, not even a blink. But her fingers were curled tight, as if holding on to something invisible. "I'll take her," Jareth said. The dealer blinked. "You serious?" Jareth dropped a few credits. "She comes with me." People around stared and whispered. One man said, "Why'd he waste credits on trash?" Another laughed. "Maybe he's going soft." Jareth didn't reply. He walked over to the cage and opened it slowly. The girl didn't move. He crouched down and spoke gently. "I'm not here to hurt you. Let's go." After a long pause, she shifted, dragging her weak body forward. Her arms were scratched and her knees scraped the crate floor. Jareth picked her up carefully. She didn't fight, didn't speak, just looked at him once with tired eyes. Back at the academy compound, most of the trainees were strong aliens. From different worlds, they were learning to survive the harsh deserts, training under Jareth to defend themselves, hunt, build shelters when he brought the girl in. The trainees stared. "What is that thing?" One asked. "She can't even walk," said another. Jareth didn't answer them. He carried her to a small spare room, laid her gently on a soft mat, and covered her with a blanket. He placed a bowl of warm soup next to her, and a bottle of clean water. Then he turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back at her. "You're safe here. You don't have to fear anymore," he said softly. Then he left her alone. The girl didn't touch the soup. She didn't sleep. She just stared at the wall. The words safe and fear echoing inside her tired mind. That night, she dreamt of metal rooms, sharp voices, and chains that burned. In the morning, Jareth came back. The soup was still untouched, but the blanket was wrapped tightly around her. Like armor, he sat down across the room and said nothing. He just began carving a wooden tool handle. Letting the sound of the blade sliding over would fill the silence. For 3 days, he came and sat with her, never pushing, never asking. He just left food and water, and stayed nearby. On the 4th day, something changed. The girl dragged herself across the floor slowly, painfully, till she reached the edge of the room where a beam of sunlight was shining. She sat there, eyes closed, face tilted toward the warm light. Jareth watched from the doorway. He didn't speak, didn't move. That evening, he returned with something wrapped in cloth. It was a pair of simple braces made of soft metal and rubber. They could be strapped to the legs, giving support for standing, walking, maybe even running one day. He placed them beside her and said, "I made these for you, if you want to try." The girl looked at them, then at him. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with something that hadn't been there before: confusion, hope, fear. Jareth didn't wait for thanks. He just nodded and walked away. That night, when no one was watching, she reached out and touched the braces. Her fingers moved slowly, as if she thought they might vanish. She didn't know this human, didn't understand his kindness. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like property. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was something more. The sky turned orange over Outpost Delta 7, casting a soft glow across the sand-covered compound. Inside the small room, the alien girl sat in silence. Her back against the cold wall, the mobility braces still lay beside her. Untouched since the night before, she hadn't spoken. Not even a single word. Her arms were thin, her eyes always watching, but never meeting anyone's gaze. She moved little, except when sunlight reached the floor. Then she crawled toward it. As if chasing warmth she didn't understand. Jareth noticed, but he didn't force her each day. He brought her a clean bowl of soup, a fresh blanket, and a quiet presence. He would sit near her door in the evening, fixing broken tools or carving wood. Not saying much, letting the silence stretch comfortably. Others at the academy didn't understand why he kept her. The trainees whispered when she passed. Some laughed. Some looked away. One called her Ghost Girl. Another said, she'll never be useful. But one morning, Jareth walked past her room and froze. She was on her hands, dragging her body across the dusty floor. Inch by inch, not toward the food, not toward the bed, but toward the open door. Toward the sun. Her arms trembled, her knees scraped against the ground. But she didn't stop. He watched without speaking. She reached the sunlight, collapsed onto her side, and closed her eyes, breathing softly. Later that day, Jareth adjusted the braces and brought them to her again. This time, he knelt beside her, gently lifting one of her legs. She didn't pull away. These won't make you strong, he said, his voice calm. But they'll help you move. She didn't speak. But she looked at him, really looked. It was the first time he saw something behind her eyes. Question, not fear. He left the braces beside her and walked out that night. When the academy was quiet, the girl sat in the dark room staring at the metal supports. Her fingers brushed the surface, slowly learning the shape, the weight. The warmth left by his hands. She didn't understand his kindness. But she didn't fear it anymore. In the following days, the braces disappeared from the floor and were later seen beside her bed. Sometimes she wore them, trying to stand against the wall, failing, falling, and trying again. Once, she collapsed hard and let out a sharp cry. Jareth ran in, but she waved him off. Just once, a small shake of her head. He stepped back, smiled slightly, and said nothing. Soon, some of the trainees noticed. They saw her crawling less and sitting taller. They still whispered, but some began watching more closely. One evening, Jareth found her drawing in the sand near the training yard. Strange symbols and patterns that glowed faintly under the moonlight. It wasn't child's play. It was something else, delicate, complex, alive. He knelt down beside her and pointed to one shape. Is this your language? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Her lips parted, and she whispered, voice dry and unused. Memory. Jareth didn't move, didn't speak. He waited. She pointed at another symbol and whispered, pain. Then another, home. And finally, lost. It was the first time he heard her voice. And it cracked like broken ice, but it was a beginning. Jareth touched the symbols lightly and said, you remember more than they think. She stared at him, confused by the idea that someone saw her as more than a broken girl. After that, she began waking earlier, sitting by the window each morning. Watching the sky, she spoke only a few words, but everyone felt like a gift. The trainees still stared. But now a few nodded when they passed her, not mockingly, but with curiosity and Jareth. He began to leave small pieces of old tech and tools in her room. She didn't ask why, but she started to fix them quietly, skillfully. Her hands were slow but precise. One night, Jareth entered the room to find her asleep at the table, a small machine softly blinking next to her, repaired perfectly. He covered her with a blanket and whispered, "You're not broken." She didn't hear him, but she smiled in her sleep, just a little, outside. The stars stretched across the sky, silent witnesses to something that had just begun. A girl with a broken spirit was learning how to stand again. And no one saw it coming except the human who never stopped believing she could. Asterisk. Asterisk night came early on Outpost Delta 7. The wind outside howled like it carried lost voices from other worlds. Inside her room, the alien girl sat curled beneath her blanket. Her eyes wide open, her body had grown a little stronger. But her dreams had not. She often woke in the dark, trembling, whispers spilling from her lips in a language even she didn't remember fully. Her voice was soft and broken, like she was trapped in places that no longer existed. Jareth began leaving a small lantern near her bed each night, not too bright, just warm enough to chase away the worst shadows. He never asked about the nightmares, never forced her to speak, but one night he heard something that stopped him at the door. No more fire. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. Her arms moved as if shielding herself from blows that were no longer there. He stood silently, not opening the door, not making a sound, just listening to the pain she couldn't hide. In her sleep, the next morning, he brought her a small piece of metal. Smooth and round, he handed it to her and said, "This used to be a weapon. But I melted it down. Now it's just a charm." She held it in her hand, staring at it for a long time, then slowly placed it on the table beside her bed. She didn't speak, but her fingers brushed his as he turned to leave. That touch said more than words could. Later that day, she asked him quietly, "Why did you buy me?" Jareth sat down beside her, thinking before he answered. "I didn't buy you." He said softly, "I saved you because I saw something in your eyes. Not fear, not weakness. Something still alive." She looked away, unsure of how to answer. She had heard many things in her life: orders, threats, screams, but never something like that. The days passed, and she began to draw more often in the dirt outside her room. Strange shapes, complex designs, alien letters that made no sense to the other trainees. But Jareth watched carefully. He saw patterns forming, blueprints even. One evening, he brought her a small, damaged drone. A scout model, torn apart by years of rust. He placed it in front of her and said nothing. She stared at it for an hour before finally reaching out. Her fingers were slow but sure, twisting wires, adjusting circuits. Jareth didn't say a word, just sat nearby. 2 days later, the drone buzzed back to life, hovering awkwardly in the air before crashing gently to the floor. She looked at it, then at Jareth, afraid he would be angry. Instead, he laughed softly, picked it up, and placed it back on the table. "Try again," he said with a smile. Something strange happened then. She smiled back, just a little, but not everyone was pleased. Some trainees watched with narrowed eyes. One whispered, "She's just showing off." Another muttered, "She's still broken inside." They didn't know her story. They didn't know what it took to make her smile that night. Jareth found a recording device half buried in the old supply room, damaged but usable. He cleaned it and placed it near her sleeping mat with a note that said, "Speak into it if you want. Just for yourself." At first, she ignored it, but one night when the wind was loud and sleep refused to come, she picked it up and pressed record. "My name is..." She paused. "I don't remember." She sat there, the red light blinking, the silence heavy. Then she continued, "I used to be something. Before they put wires in my head. Before they took my legs. Before they broke my name." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I still see the fire. I still hear them screaming. I was not meant to survive, but someone picked me up." She looked out the window at the stars. "Maybe I was never a weapon. Maybe I was never a tool. Maybe I was something else all along." She stopped the recording, placed it gently on the table, and lay down for the first time in weeks she slept without crying outside. The desert winds carried the soft sound of the repaired drone buzzing in circles above her roof. And inside, a broken girl slowly started to rebuild herself. The morning sun was hidden behind thick clouds. The academy grounds felt colder than usual, and the air smelled of burning wire. A loud buzzing sound echoed through the main building. Then silence, followed by shouts. The main generator had failed. Lights flickered and died across the compound. The heat systems stopped. The communication tower went dark. Panic spread among the trainees. Jareth moved fast, checking control panels, climbing to the roof, rewiring old junctions, but nothing worked. They had backup power, but only for 2 days after that. The cold would become deadly. Inside her room, the alien girl sat quietly, hugging her knees. She watched her window blink from light to shadow. Light to shadow, then darkness settled in, and it didn't change again. Someone knocked once, opened her door, and said sharply, "Don't leave your room, it's not safe, and don't touch anything." Then they were gone. She waited, still as stone. But her hands twitched with unease. She could feel the tension in the building, hear the footsteps rushing down metal hallways, the muttering voices, the fear. Finally, she strapped on her braces and crawled toward her door. Outside, everything was dim. Jareth was crouched near a smoking fuse box, his hands covered in grease, sweat on his brow. She said nothing, just watched. Then she turned and moved the other way toward the main power room. No one saw her leave, no one followed. Inside the power room, wires hung like vines. Some sparked, others smoked, screens were dead, data erased. A cracked panel exposed the energy core glowing faintly. Dangerously unstable, she took a deep breath, crawled to the wall, and opened a small utility box. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from memory. This was familiar. Somewhere deep in her mind, the layout made sense. Her fingers found the right switch. Then the next, she remembered not from books or lessons, but from a darker place. She had done this before, in another lab, under orders, with pain behind every mistake. But now, there was no voice screaming at her, no threat of punishment. Now she was alone and free. She pulled wires, reconnected coils, used a small metal tool from her brace kit to bypass 2 regulators. Her movements were slow but precise. Outside, Jareth heard a low hum rise in the distance. Then the emergency lights flickered back on. The heating system groaned to life. Trainees cheered, unaware of what had happened. Jareth rushed to the control room and found her slumped on the floor. Smoke in her hair, the drone she had rebuilt, hovering over her head like a quiet guardian. She didn't say a word, just pointed to the core. "It needs a new converter," she whispered. Jareth knelt beside her, looked at the system, and saw everything she had done. Perfectly, safely, brilliantly. He didn't know what to say. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder and nodded. By evening, word had spread. The girl fixed the generator. Someone said, "She saved the heat system." Said another, "She's not broken," whispered one more. She sat in the dining area that night, quietly eating soup. No one spoke to her, but no one looked away either. A few even nodded at her when they passed, not out of pity, but out of respect. Jareth sat across from her, drinking tea, watching her carefully. He finally asked, "How did you know what to do?" She looked down at her bowl, then slowly said, "I remember things. Not all of them, but enough from before." He asked. She nodded. "Before they erased me, there was silence between them. Deep and full, but not uncomfortable. You did more than fix a machine," he said. "You changed something here. I just did what I could." She replied softly. Outside the windows, the lights of the academy burned steady again, and the stars above seemed a little brighter. For the first time, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt real, part of something. She had saved them, and not by force, not by strength, but by the part of herself she had once been told was useless. Her mind, and somewhere deep inside, something began to light up again. Not just memory, but purpose. The academy courtyard buzzed with quiet talk. Some of the trainees now looked at her differently, not with disgust or mockery, but with cautious respect. But not all of them. 2 days after she repaired the generator, a group of 4 trainees stood outside her room, whispering, laughing low. Their leader, a tall and proud alien named Corin, crossed his arms. Watching her through the narrow window slit, "She thinks she's something now," he said, his voice full of bitterness. "Just because she lit a few wires." One of the others added, "She's still broken. She walks like a crawling worm." They didn't know Jareth was listening from the shadows, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Inside the room, the girl had removed her braces for cleaning. Her hands were stained with oil from another small projecta sensor upgrade for the academy gates. She was humming softly, the kind of hum that comes from a quiet place. Not joy exactly, but peace. Then the door burst open. Corin walked in with heavy steps. The others closed behind, still playing with scrap. He sneered. "Maybe next time you fix something, you can fix yourself too." She froze, slowly turning to face him. Her back was straight, her eyes steady. Her legs shook slightly without the braces, but she didn't crawl away. Corin stepped closer, knocking the half-built sensor off her table. It broke with a small click. "Oops," he smiled. She said nothing, just looked at the broken pieces on the floor. Her fingers twitched once, then relaxed. She reached behind her bed and pulled something out. It was a small device Jareth had given her weeks ago, something simple for personal safety, a shock beacon. Not strong enough to injure, but enough to make someone regret touching her. Corin took another step forward, his voice low. "Go ahead, try it." She pressed the button. The beacon sparked. A pulse hit his chest, and he dropped to the floor with a loud grunt, muscles locking for 3 full seconds. The others stepped back. Stunned, she didn't run, she didn't scream, she just said, "You don't scare me anymore, Corin." Groaned on the floor, trying to stand. Jareth appeared in the doorway behind them, arms crossed, face calm. "What's going on?" he asked coldly. No one answered. He looked at Corin, still twitching slightly, then at the girl. Standing unshaken without her braces, she defended herself. Jareth said aloud, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Anyone who tries to harm her again will answer to me." Then he helped her sit, picked up the broken sensor from the floor, and said gently, "Can it be fixed?" She looked at it, nodded once. Yes, that night. She worked quietly at her desk. The same sensor that had been shattered hours before was glowing again. Wires neatly rewired, its screen pulsing blue. A trainee passed by and paused, then knocked gently on her open door. It was the youngest of the group, a shy alien boy with green skin and wide eyes. "Can you teach me?" he asked, pointing to the tool in her hand. "I want to learn what you know." She blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Sit here." The boy smiled and entered. They worked side by side, the silence filled only by the gentle hum of machines. When Jareth walked by later, he saw them laughing softly, the sensor glowing bright on the table. In that moment, she wasn't a burden or a project or a survivor. She was a teacher, and no one could ever take that from her again. A red alarm rang out across the academy just after midnight. It was sharp, cold, and unnatural, echoing through the walls like a scream. Trainees leaped from their bunks, grabbing jackets and gear. Jareth ran to the central terminal, but the screen showed only static. He knew that sound. It wasn't a drill. The perimeter sensors had gone offline. All of them, at once, radars, bandits who hunted the edge planets, not for food or shelter, but for power, equipment, and slaves. Jareth barked orders as the outer lights flickered. He told the trainees to hide in the bunker room, but he stayed. Behind gathering weapons and locking gates, in her room, the alien girl woke to the sound of panic. Her hands clutched the edge of the table as her mind flashed with images men in black armor. Chains, screaming voices. She strapped on her braces with shaking hands. Stepped into the dark hallway and found the boy she had taught earlier sitting. In a corner, crying, "They're coming," he whispered. "They'll take us, won't they?" She knelt beside him and said firmly, "Not if we make them stop." Smoke curled under the academy gates as energy blasts slammed against the outer wall. The first wave had arrived. Jareth tried to hold the entrance, but he was outnumbered. Blast threw him against a wall, and he fell hard, blood trailing down his temple. The girl saw it from the shadows and froze. Her chest tightened. Her knees shook. Every part of her wanted to crawl away and hide. But then something inside her clicked. Not fear, not rage, something else. She picked up the nearest tool bag and crawled into the vent system, navigating the narrow pipes with speed and memory. She had been in places like this before, only back then. It was to escape pain. Now it was to save someone. She reached the control room, hands moving fast across the emergency circuits. Her fingers found a broken line, rewired it, then reactivated the auto defenses outside. Mounted turrets roared to life, spraying the raiders with stun rounds, buying precious seconds. She opened another hatch and crawled down into the gate chamber. There, she found Jareth bleeding, barely conscious. Trying to reach his weapon, she dragged him behind cover with all her strength. Her braces sparked, but she didn't stop. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. Jareth coughed, voice rough. "You need to run," but she didn't. Instead, she pulled a small detonator from her belt, one of the old devices she had repaired weeks ago. "I rewired the fuel tanks," she said, her voice trembling. "If I push this, the blast will seal the gates." "But you'll be trapped," he warned. She looked down, tears shining in her eyes. "I used to hide from pain. Now I run toward it, because this place is mine now." A raider burst through the smoke, but before he could raise his weapon, the girl threw the detonator. A fireball erupted at the gate, metal bending and walls shaking. The force knocked both of them backward, but it worked. The gate was sealed shut. Silence followed, heavy and sharp. She lay beside Jareth, chest rising slowly. Her hands blackened from smoke, but her eyes wide open. "You're not broken," Jareth whispered. She smiled faintly. "Took you long enough to notice." That night, the raiders fled, thinking reinforcements had arrived. But it was just one small girl with braces and a fire in her soul. She wasn't a survivor anymore. She was a protector. Morning arrived slowly over Outpost Delta 7, not with golden light, but with thick clouds and the scent of burnt metal in the wind. The academy courtyard was quiet, filled with ash, debris, and broken panels. Jareth sat in the medbay, his side wrapped in bandages, his face bruised but smiling. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. He didn't feel lucky, he felt proud, outside the window. She walked across the training yard, slowly but upright, her mobility braces creaking softly. With each step, her body still carried scars, but her back was straight, her eyes calm. The other trainees stood in a circle, watching her not in silence, but in awe. One of them placed a hand over his heart and bowed slightly. Then another and another. No one told them to. It was instinct. She had done what none of them could. She had faced death without a weapon, without running. And she had one. Later that day, the council ship arrived from the central colonies. Sent to inspect the damage and evaluate the Academy's future, they asked Jareth for a report. He handed it to them. but added one sentence in his own handwriting: recommend her for full academy status. And for a role as tactical systems specialist. The council officer raised a brow. You mean the disabled one? Jareth looked at him, voice firm. No, I mean the strongest one. That evening? A small ceremony was held, not official, not grand. Just the academy gathered in the dining hall. Jareth stood at the front, his arms still in a sling. He called her forward. And she stepped into the light. I once saw a girl who didn't speak, who couldn't stand, who flinched when you looked at her. Jareth said to the crowd, "Today I see someone who held this place together with her bare hands, her mind, and her heart." He opened a box and revealed a cloth badge with a silver thread woven through it. The academy's crest. He placed it in her palm, and, for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she did, her voice clear and soft. "My name is Lyra," she said. I remember now. The hall was silent, not because they were shocked, but because they were listening. Really listening. I was not built for war. I was not made to fight, but I survived, I learned, I built, and today I stand because I chose not to stay broken. One of the trainees shouted to Lyra, and the others repeated it again and again. Louder, she looked at Jareth, her voice softer now. "Thank you for seeing me before I saw myself," he smiled. "You saw yourself first. I just waited for you to believe it." Later that night, she sat on the rooftop alone. The sky above full of stars. The wind was cool, but not cold. Her hands were wrapped around a warm mug, steam rising gently into the air. The small drone she had fixed hovered beside her, blinking softly, loyal as ever. She looked toward the distant hills, knowing others like her were still out there, forgotten, silenced, broken, but not for long, because now she had a name, a badge, a place, and soon she'd have a mission, not just to protect the academy, but to find those still lost in the dark, just like she once was. She wasn't just fixed, she was whole.